What's up guys, my name's Dean, or as most of you know me, Twisty. It's time to wrap up once again. This is round 11. I didn't really watch too much footy this weekend, so I'll try and give my best analysis as I possibly can of each game. But let's get stuck into the ladder. North Melbourne 10-1 on top there after the big win over Richmond. The Swans also in the second place, outright second, I might add, 9-2. And then you've got a couple wins on 8-3 and a couple of teams on 7-4 to round out that top 8. So it's really a high-end top 8 this season. And Fremantle finally got their first win at the bottom of the ladder. They're now in the 16th position, so they can get excited. And Carlton, who would have thought they'd be sitting at 6-5 with the possibility of going 7-5 next week? I think that's just crazy talk, but let's get into Friday night's game. North Melbourne won by 70 points over Richmond, and big win to North Melbourne. And I didn't really rate their credibility too much up to this stage, even though they were 9-0. But a win over Richmond, you can say, all right, they're doing what they need to do. Then you can go, oh well, do we even have to rate the win over Richmond? Because Richmond are rated like 14th on the ladder, and they played like a side that was 14th on the ladder last night, or Friday night. So they were pretty rubbish, Richmond. Yes, they had injuries, but who cares? They were appalling to watch. I turned it off at about half-time, or didn't turn it off, just had it playing in the background. But it was just a mockery of a performance. North Melbourne were just too good, too damn good. Harvey is he's a miracle of a man at his age. But we'll move on from that. North Melbourne were very, very good to 10-1 now. And on Saturday, Hawthorn played Melbourne. This was closer than I thought at the start of the game. I was probably like, Melbourne could probably win this. I think the conditions might suit them. And then they ended up going down by 3 goals. So I think they did fairly well to stick in this one, Melbourne. Hawthorn aren't playing at their best, but they're still getting the job done, which is winning. And I think that's probably where Melbourne will, maybe up their consistency next year. I think that this season, if, whenever they play against such a high quality side such as a Hawthorn, it is going to be very difficult to beat them because of their lack in consistency and performance. Which Hawthorn, they've got all these veterans, Lewis, Mitchell, these guys just again and again deliver, and Burgoyne as well, just every time. So Hawthorn, another quality win there, just by a couple of goals. Gunston kicked 3 in that one. What was a pretty, crappy weekend for forwards, I might add. And I was watching this game instead at Etihad Stadium because it was indoors and there was no rain. So Carlton got a win over the Lions. Armfield kicked 3, Lamb kicked 3, Cripps kicked a couple, Rich kicked a couple for Brisbane. Kerridge had 30 touches for the Blues as well. And Carlton, that's not a typo there, Rockcliffe did have 48 disposals. He racked up the ball in his return game this week. It was crazy to watch. I think he had about 6 touches in the first 3 minutes. So he was on track for about 200 touches. But he ended up with 48 in the end there, which is just insane to end up with 48 touches. But Carlton, I think that they're definitely improving, but they do have a lot of older guys that you may not suspect will be there in the coming years if they are doing somewhat of a full rebuild rather than, I think, taking the cheating system. It's kind of like what Richmond did in the sense with they're bringing in a lot of older, more experienced players to sort of speed up that rebuild process. But what Brendan Bolton's actually done is he's got those players playing some of their best football. He hasn't got dud players, like even Liam Jones is playing good football, and they wanted to get rid of him after the first year of his 3-year deal. So I think Carlton are doing all the right things at the moment, heading in the right track. And who knows, a win this week over the Saints. They're 7-5. They're only 1 game outside the 8 right now, but at like 50%. So it's going to be very tough for them to make the finals, but who bloody knows? It could happen. Next game was down at the Cattery. I did watch this one as well. Geelong and the Giants. It was 16 points. Lockie Whitfield had a goal after the siren to make it back to just 10. But it was a very good goal after the siren too. About 55-metre bomb from Whitfield, who ended up with 3 goals. Menzel had 3. Hawkins, Kirsten a couple each. Scully had a couple, and Toby Green had 3 as well for the Giants. Stevie J, enter Stevie J at Simmons Stadium. He lit the place up within the first couple of minutes, kicked the first goal, miracle from the boundary line. I was like, my goodness, this guy is a genius. He knows this ground better than probably anyone. apart from maybe a couple of Geelong players, but even then, he's still been there a fair while. And they were just very good, Geelong. I think that the Giants had a little bit of inconsistencies in their game, and that's probably what let them down. There was just a couple of times Geelong got a little bit of a run on, and it made it difficult for them to peg it back in that third quarter was really, really the key to this matchup here. And even the last quarter, I think it was only, 15 points, or it was very close. Three-quarter time, I can't remember what the score was, but it was very close. I think the Giants, if they can fix up a couple of things, I said they would make the top four if they won one of their next three. They lost to Adelaide on the road, they lost to Geelong on the road, and now they play Sydney at home next week. If they win that one, I still think they'll make the top four, but it's going to be very difficult as well. But the top eight's so even, anyone can beat anyone on any given day, so I feel like the Giants are still in with a top four hunt the moment. So Geelong, they're definitely up there as well, even though they've lost the last couple that they probably weren't expected to lose. Moving on to Sydney and the Gold Coast Suns, was played at Metricon Stadium up in the Gold Coast. It was a crazy game. It was like wet and wild out there. And I had a look at the game high tackle count. I thought that there was going to break the tackle record. It didn't quite do that. The tackle record was 142 by Richmond against Port Adelaide in round 10 of 2010. Sydney had 135 tackles in this one, and the Gold Coast had 119. So they had a combined total of, I think, 200 and 54 tackles. And the combined total tackles in a game was Richmond and Port Adelaide, which was 258 tackles. So they're about 4 tackles short in the end of breaking the all-time tackle record. It was so wet in this game. I was surprised Sydney ended up with 20 when they had 24 scoring shots. It just looked like a pool out there. I thought it was a water polo match, for God's sake. It was ridiculous. Anyway, moving on, Fremantle and the Swans. Fremantle and Essendon. The Dockers finally get their first win, and it was by 10 goals over the Bombers, or 11 or 12 goals, whatever you want. But the Bombers, they were useless. I mean, we kind of probably expected them to be like this throughout the season. But, yeah, Fremantle, they're probably the worst zip and 10 side ever, and finally get a win over a side that's, 1-10 now, so I don't know. There's a lot of talk about tanking this week. I didn't think either club was going to tank because there's no real point in getting the number one pick. The number one pick is sort of a media pick. It is who the media thinks will be the best player in the competition. If you don't pick that player, you're wrong, or you make the wrong decision, and then if your risk doesn't pay off, then what's the real point in getting it? So, interesting tanking discussions. We'll talk about that another time. But we'll get into that in due course, as I say. Let's take a look at the Coleman. It was a pretty quiet week for forwards. I think Franklin kicked 1, Kennedy kicked 1, Lynch kicked 1. So those top 3 guys were pretty quiet. Jenkins was closing up to 34 now. Betts and Gunston on 28, and the rest is probably too far back, you'd think, to get into that Coleman medal race at this stage. Now let's finish off with the Sunday games. Collingwood and Port Adelaide. Mason Cox kicked a couple. Pendlebury kicked 1. For the Power, Young kicked 4. Need kicked 4. It was a huge win to Port Adelaide. 67 points in the end. Is their season back on track? Well, maybe. This is the thing. Maybe they're only beating a Collingwood, which is not the greatest side in the competition right now, but they're definitely on the up if they can consistently beat. This is basically the difference between the top 8 and the bottom 10 this year, is the sides in the top 8 will consistently beat the sides in the bottom 10, except for maybe Geelong when they lost to Collingwood and Carlton. But then the sides in the bottom 10 will, probably drop a few games they're expected to win. And I think that's what Collingwood maybe did this week. I thought they were going to win this week, and they kind of just blew it. So whether the effort's not there, Cloak was rubbish. I don't think he'll be at Collingwood next year, because if another club wants to take him, they may as well. Fremantle would have been screwed if they took him 4 years ago. Who knows? Maybe he would have been a better player there, but he needs a fresh start. I don't think he's fitting into that Collingwood team right now, and he's not high on confidence, which is really sucky for him. But let's move on to the game of the round. The Dogs and the Eagles. 8-point winners, the Western Bulldogs here. Libba kicked 3. He was very close to the best man on the ground. Lockie Hunter's just gone under the radar, I reckon, and he's just had, 35 plus touches each week. So he's definitely getting a ton of the ball and using it very well. So he's doing all the right stuff there. For the Eagles, they that's their 4th loss on the road to top 8 sides. So they've now lost to Sydney, Geelong, Hawthorn, and the Western Bulldogs on the road. It's going to be very difficult for them to win on the road in the finals. I think that they're not as good as they were last year, but I think the competition is definitely improved. Saying that, I think last year, there was probably really Hawthorn and the Eagles as the top 2 sides to really look at how we were going to shape the finals, and even Fremantle. Like, no one really rated Fremantle or Sydney going into that final series. So definitely I think that this year we'll actually have a really, really exciting grand final, no matter which 2 teams are in it. I think it's going to be a great final series to watch, rather than Hawthorn just blowing out a team in the grand final, and we may see a new premier for the first time in 3 years. We'll make it interesting. Now, final game of the round, Josh Jenkins scored 45 points and Kilda scored 45 points. That's all you need to know in this one. Huge win to the Adelaide Crows, and they got a massive win there. But that's it for this week. Big movers all around the 8. I think it's going to continue to shift within that top 8, but I definitely think that next year we'll have an argument for a 10-team final series, because I think that next year, there's all these sides pushing for the 8. Who knows, maybe with 10 teams in there, they might get a wild card in and potentially make some upsets. So that might be interesting there to see. But thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed your weekend and you enjoyed your football. I will see you guys later.